Hi, my name is Christina Anderson, and I'm the city planner for Kalamazoo. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about adult use, otherwise known as recreational marijuana. The following presentation will give some background on marijuana in the state of Michigan, but will focus on the draft work staff has done to allow marijuana within the city of Kalamazoo. Specifically, this presentation will focus on how we are considering incorporating marijuana into the zoning code, how we're creating a social equity policy, and the local licensing requirements. Adult use marijuana was legalized in the state of Michigan in 2018 with the approval of the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act. This act legalized marijuana for persons 21 years of age and older. It required for cities to opt out if they did not want to allow adult use marijuana businesses within their community. And it legalized industrial hemp, such as CBD products that have less than 0.3% THC. So a little background on marijuana from 2018 to today. Again, in November of 2018, voters in the state of Michigan approved the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act, which permitted the use of marijuana by people who are 21 years or older and authorized the licensing of businesses associated with marijuana. In July of 2019, the state of Michigan issued a set of emergency rules, good for 1 year, so through July of 2020, that govern how these businesses are licensed and operated. In December of 2019, the City of Kalamazoo, through a vote by the City Commission, opted to temporarily opt out of adult use marijuana businesses within the community until June of 2020. The intent of this was to give staff time to write the local zoning and licensing rules and to create a social equity plan that would benefit the community in Kalamazoo. In February of 2020, 2 public meetings were held at City Hall to start to get feedback on adult use marijuana, where it should be located, how it should be regulated, and what should be in the social equity plan. Staff also participated in a panel discussion on adult use marijuana that was held at the Douglas Community Center. Small discussion groups, including discussions with those that are already in the medical marijuana business community, were also held in February. At the end of the month, based on all the discussions that had happened up until that point, staff created a set of very preliminary draft zoning rules that laid out where and how different marijuana businesses could be located and permitted in the community. And that is currently up for public review. This presentation will go over what is proposed in more detail. With the release of the proposed zoning rules and this presentation, which outlines what the city is considering for the social equity policy and the licensing rules, everything is now out for public review and comment, and there'll be more information on how to send your comments at the end of this presentation. The state of Michigan outlined 10 different adult use marijuana license types or business types. Many of these are the same or very similar to those that the state permitted under medical marijuana. If you're looking at your screen, specifically those on the left-hand side, very closely match with the marijuana uses permitted with medical marijuana, with one big exception, and that is the number of plants a grower is allowed to grow is different between medical and adult use. The state of Michigan also created 5 new license or business types, and those are listed on the right-hand side of your screen. These are an excess grower license, which permits a grower additional capacity to grow marijuana plants. Micro business, which allows a person or entity to grow up to 150 plants, process those plants, package, and sell the product on site. A consumption establishment, which allows for the consumption of marijuana products by those that are 21 years or older in a commercial space. And the last two are kind of tied together. It's an event organizer and an event license. So if you are an event organizer, you are permitted to go for an event license for a marijuana-related event. You will notice that all these license types are listed in 3 different colors. And each of those have different meanings given by the state of Michigan in terms of when the applications can be applied for. So those items listed in blue, Class A and micro business, those require Michigan residency in order to make application for a license at the state level. Those listed in green, in order to make application at the state level to open one of those businesses, you need to already hold a license for a medical marijuana business. The use types listed in black do not have restrictions on applications at the state level for residency or already being in the marijuana industry. So given that background at the state level, what I'd like to talk about is how the city is proposing to include adult use marijuana in the city's zoning code. And so why do we need to do that? Any business that opens in the city of Kalamazoo can only open if it's permitted by the zoning code. The zoning code divides the city up into districts, such as commercial or residential, mixed use, manufacturing districts, and then provides permitted uses for each of those districts and building parameters, such as height or where a building could be located on a lot or any other limitations that might be appropriate for that specific use. Marijuana is no different than other uses in our community. It would need to be incorporated into the zoning code in order to be allowed. Now, the City of Kalamazoo will permit many of the new marijuana license types in the zoning code. And like lots of other businesses, they'll be permitted in some districts and not in others. And they will have some limitations or parameters or standards associated with them that guide how and where they are permitted. This table lists the marijuana use types the city is considering permitting within its boundaries. It lists the districts that it may be permitted in, and in the last column, under the notes, some of the standards that might be included with each of the uses. One standard that is not listed in this table, because it applies to almost all use types, is the required separation distance from protected uses. The protected uses are schools that provide education for kindergartners and or grades 1 through 12, and state licensed daycare facilities. Let's take each of the proposed use types one by one and look at where they're permitted and what specific standards are associated with each. The first is a grower. Growers are licensed to cultivate or grow marijuana and sell or transfer the marijuana to other marijuana establishments. There are 3 types of grower licenses available. Class A, which allows you to grow up to 100 plants. Class B, which allows growth up to 500 plants. And Class C, which authorizes growth up to 2,000 plants. The proposed zoning rules would allow Class A, again up to 100 plants, in the community commercial district, the limited manufacturing district, known as M1, and general manufacturing, known as M2. Class B and C grower licenses are only permitted in the manufacturing districts of M1 and M2. There are some required standards. First, Class A, when it's located in the community commercial district or CC, all growing operations must be done indoors. And of course, for all growers, the 1,000-foot separation distance between schools and 500 feet from daycares apply. The second use type is a processor. A processor is someone or an entity that are licensed to obtain marijuana from other marijuana establishments, process and package that marijuana, and sell and transfer it to another marijuana establishment. It is permitted only in the manufacturing districts, M1 and M2. It too has required standards. All processing activities must be done indoors. All processors must also be located at least 1,000 feet from any school and at least 500 feet from any state licensed daycare. Safety compliance. A safety compliance is a business that is licensed to test marijuana products, including certification for potency or level of strength and the presence for any contaminants. A safety compliance use type is being proposed to be permitted in the Community Commercial Zoning District, LiveWork 1, LiveWork 2, the Business Technology and Research District, known as BTR, and both manufacturing districts, M1 and M2. There are no required standards proposed for a safety compliance use. This is the only marijuana use type that does not need to have a separation distance from schools and licensed daycares. Secure transporter. A secure transporter is a license type that allows a business to obtain marijuana from a marijuana establishment in order to transport that marijuana to another establishment. It is proposed to be permitted in the Community Commercial or CC District, Limited Manufacturing or M1, and General Manufacturing M2. The required standards for secure transporter are the following. When located in the Community Commercial or CC District, any warehousing of marijuana product is permitted, but only as an accessory use. This means that it's a secondary activity and the transportation element is the primary purpose of the business, both in the amount of space used and activities. The 1,000-foot separation between a secure transporter and schools and 500 feet from daycares is applicable. A retailer. Retailers are licensed businesses that can obtain marijuana from other marijuana establishments in order to sell that product to other establishments or individuals who are 21 years or older. It is proposed to be permitted in the Community Commercial, the LiveWork 1, and the Commercial Central Business District, or CCBD. This last district covers downtown Kalamazoo. There are 3 required standards for retailers. First, all activities must be located indoors. Second is the required separation between a retailer and a school of 1,000 feet and a retailer and a daycare of 500 feet. There is also a 1,000-foot separation distance between retailers or between retailers and provisioning centers. Provisioning centers is the term that the state of Michigan uses for medical marijuana businesses that sell medical marijuana. A retailer and a provisioning center are very similar uses. They just sell a different type of product. The City of Kalamazoo required, when approving medical marijuana, a 1,000-foot distance between provisioning centers, and this is carrying over into adult use marijuana. The city is proposing an exception to this 1,000-foot separation distance, and that is allowing half the distance, or 500 feet, between retailers and or provisioning centers when the applicant or applicants are city residents that reside within one of the following census tracts: 1, 9, 10, 2.02, and 3, which cover the East Side, North Side, and Edison neighborhoods. And if an applicant is a city resident in one of those census tracts for the last 3 years and has a majority ownership in the business, 51% or more, that business is permitted to have a separation distance of 500 feet. The second way to obtain this 500-foot exception is if the applicant is a city resident with a marijuana conviction, provided that that conviction does not involve distribution of controlled substance to a minor. The next use type being considered is the micro business. Now, this is one of the new use types that the state of Michigan has laid out for cities to consider. A micro business allows multiple activities related to marijuana to be done on one site. So specifically, it allows for the growth of up to 150 plants, the processing and packaging of the product of those plants, and the ability to sell or transfer the product to individuals that are 21 years or older. Micro businesses are not allowed to sell or transfer their product to other marijuana establishments outside of the safety compliance or laboratory facility. Micro businesses are proposed to be allowed in the following zoning districts: Community Commercial or CC, Live Work 2, Commercial Central Business District, CCBD, and both manufacturing districts, M1 and M2. The required standards being proposed for a micro business are, first, the required separation distance from schools and state licensed daycares, and a 500-foot separation distance between other micro businesses. There is an exception to this last requirement. The 500-foot separation distance can be reduced to 250 feet when an applicant or applicants are city residents that reside within census tract numbers 1, 9, 10, 2.02, and 3, which again cover the East Side, North Side, and Edison neighborhoods, for the past 3 years and have a majority stake in the business, or 51% or more ownership in that business. The second exception is when the applicant is a city resident with a marijuana conviction, provided that it does not involve distribution of a controlled substance to a minor. In both of these two situations, the 500 feet can be reduced to 250 feet between micro business operations. The next license type is excess grower. An excess grower is a license that can be issued to those who are already in the medical marijuana grow industry. And what it does is allow additional growing capacity. It is permitted only in the M2 district because it is a very large operation. It is subject to the 1,000-foot separation distance between itself and schools and from state licensed daycares. The last use being considered for incorporation into the zoning code is a designated consumption establishment. A designated consumption establishment is a commercial space for the consumption of marijuana products by those that are 21 years or older. It is proposed to be permitted in the Community Commercial or CC District and the Commercial Central Business District, CCBD, which again is located in downtown Kalamazoo. The only required standard associated with the designated consumption establishment is the 1,000-foot separation distance from itself and schools and 500 feet distance from state licensed daycares. I did not talk about the event organizer or the event license as it relates to changes to the zoning code. The City of Kalamazoo is considering allowing these two activities within the city limits, but it is not something that would be incorporated into the zoning code itself. Let's now talk about social equity in Kalamazoo as it relates to adult use marijuana. Before we can talk about social equity in Kalamazoo, it is important to talk about it at the state level. When the state released its adult use rules, it included a social equity element that was divided into 3 pieces. The first was the creation of a disproportionately impacted community designation. A disproportionately impacted community is one that was highly impacted by marijuana enforcement. The state of Michigan designated 41 of these communities, including the City of Kalamazoo. This designation allows for a discounted fee when an applicant applies for their state license for a adult use marijuana business, and technical assistance when the applicant is a resident of one of these 41 disproportionately impacted communities. The second piece of the state's social equity plan focuses on application requirements for the state license for an adult use marijuana business. The state of Michigan has said that any applicant for their state license, whether they are located in a disproportionately impacted community or not, must submit a social equity plan for their specific business with their application. This social equity plan must detail how they will promote and encourage participation in the marijuana industry by people from disproportionately impacted communities and how it will positively impact those communities. The third piece of the state social equity plan focuses on reductions in the licensing fees from the state of Michigan for adult use marijuana businesses. License fees are reduced by 25% if an applicant or applicants are residents of one of the disproportionately impacted communities for the last 5 years. 25% fee reductions are also given to those applicants that have a marijuana-related conviction, provided that that conviction is not for distribution of a controlled substance to a minor. An additional 10% reduction is given if the applicant was a caregiver for at least 2 years between the years 2008 and 2017. In order to take advantage of these fee reductions, the applicant must have a majority ownership in the business. The City of Kalamazoo is proposing its own social equity policy as it relates to adult use marijuana in Kalamazoo. This would be above and beyond whatever the state of Michigan requires or allows in terms of its reduction in fees. Why are we creating our own Kalamazoo-specific policy? First, it allows us to target our focus on disproportionately impacted individuals and neighborhoods. It allows us to think about ways to break down the entry barriers into the marijuana industry specific to Kalamazoo. And it can help provide funding for the development of activities and initiatives that will support the Kalamazoo community in alignment with our Shared Prosperity in Kalamazoo plan. As I previously mentioned, several conversations and community meetings were held in February of this year. The draft social equity policy that I will be outlining in just a moment was created from those discussions. It was created from conversations with those in the medical marijuana industry. It was done with the review of barriers to entry into the marijuana industry. And it was created with the consideration of programs and activities that would directly benefit individuals and neighborhoods disproportionately impacted by marijuana enforcement. We have divided our social equity policy into 3 different areas: our licenses, our locations, specifically how we're including it in our zoning code, and the use of any funds that are collected through tax revenues and fees. So first, looking at local licenses, the City of Kalamazoo will have its own licensing process with a fee associated with it. We will reduce that fee by 25% in the following circumstances. First, if the majority of the business is owned by one or more people who are residents of the city census tracts 1, which is Eastside, 9, 10, which are Edison, and 2.02 and 3, which are Northside. 25% reduction in the fee is also available to a city resident with a marijuana conviction, provided that it does not involve distribution to a minor. Finally, a 10% reduction in city license fees will be available for registered caregivers if the caregiver was licensed for at least 2 years between 2008 and 2017. The second piece of the City of Kalamazoo's social equity policy being proposed focuses on the locations where adult use marijuana businesses could be located in Kalamazoo. This results from a lesson learned with our medical marijuana allowances in the zoning code. The limited locations and limited types of businesses led to a sharp increase in property values that priced many people out of the market. the City of Kalamazoo is currently proposing many different adult use marijuana uses within the community in a wide variety of districts. In addition to that, there is a reduction in the separation distances between certain types of businesses, specifically retailers and provisioning centers and micro businesses, if a majority of the business is owned by one or more persons who are city residents that reside in specific census tracts. Again, those census tracts are Tract 1 on the east side, 9, 10 in Edison, and 2.02 and 3 in the north side. That distance may also be reduced if the applicant is a city resident with a marijuana conviction that does not involve distribution to a minor. The third piece of the city's proposed social equity policy has to do with community impact. The city is proposing that at least 25% of the revenue it receives will support the following programs and activities. The first is the creation of an incubator for marijuana-related businesses. This will help people of color prepare for ownership and operation of future marijuana establishments. Second is community outreach and education on marijuana, specifically on such topics as how marijuana is regulated at the state level versus the federal level. Third, funds will be used to support shared prosperity and Kalamazoo priorities, specifically looking at strong youth, strong families, and good jobs. Fourth is to increase home ownership, potentially through down payment assistance for those that were negatively impacted by marijuana convictions. The fifth activity are blight elimination programs. The final piece of the draft social equity policy focusing on community impact is the requirement that when any person or entity receives more than $10,000 in contract value or benefit from the city will require a good faith effort to hire employees with prior marijuana convictions or that live in census tracts 1, 9, 10, 2.02, or 3. That $10,000 contract benefit could include, but is certainly not limited to, the following: tax abatements, participation in the Brownfield Authority Act program, or facade and building improvement funds or work. Proposed adult use marijuana licensing in Kalamazoo. First, all adult use marijuana businesses will require a license approved from the state of Michigan. The primary license a marijuana business will need to pursue at the state is an adult use marijuana establishment license. This is from the Marijuana Regulatory Agency, which is a division of the Michigan Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, otherwise known as LARA. The state requirements and application process are more complicated than the city's process will be, and the license fees are significantly more expensive. Prospective applicants will want to check out the state's requirements before pursuing any local licensing. The City of Kalamazoo will have its own separate licensing requirement from that of the state of Michigan. The application for the City of Kalamazoo will be very similar to that of the medical marijuana facility permit application that it already uses for medical marijuana businesses. After submitting an application, city staff will review to make sure that the proposed facility meets all local regulations, including the zoning code. When approved, a provisional approval certificate will be given to the applicant, which can then be taken to the state to complete the state application. Once the state application has been reviewed and approved, proof of that is returned to the city. At that point, if all permit requirements are in place, a final city permit will be issued. It is important to note that while the City of Kalamazoo is following its medical marijuana facility permit process, there will be some differences for the adult use marijuana businesses. And this will first include an emphasis on the social equity plan and the inclusion of social equity requirements within the currently being developed licensing criteria. At this time, the city is anticipating that the fee for the adult use marijuana license will be $5,000. This fee will cover the city's administrative and enforcement expenses associated with marijuana facilities. The applicant must also pay for any building permits and inspections required for the site that the applicant has chosen separately. Now that you have heard about our draft proposals for incorporating adult use marijuana into our zoning code, the creation of a social equity policy, and the licensing rules, I want to talk to you about some of the next steps in the approval process. Current drafts of the proposed changes to the zoning code, the licensing rules, and the social equity policy are available for review off the city's webpage, and I will provide you with the location for where you can go to review that. This site is also great for watching for announcements for other opportunities to provide input on these documents. As meetings and public hearing dates are scheduled, this information will be also placed on the website. All changes to the zoning code require review by both the Planning Commission and review and approval by the City Commission, and these are done through public hearings. The social equity policy and any licensing rules require approval through the City Commission. At this time, we are asking for your comments, feedback, and suggestions, and there are several ways that you can do this. First, you can send an email to hello@kalamazooCity.org. You can also send them through the mail by sending your letters to 241 West South Street, Kalamazoo, Michigan, 49007, with the attention to Pete Eldridge. You can also send your feedback directly through the website where you access this presentation. However you choose to provide your comments, please do so. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation on adult use marijuana in Kalamazoo. Again, if you have any comments or questions, please use one of the ways to reach out, email, mail, or commenting through the website, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Thanks and have a great day. Stay safe and healthy.